The rich neighbors watched suspiciously as a poor black boy approached the pregnant woman outside the mansion. When they saw what he did next, they couldn't speak. Andre counted the coins in his palm for the third time. 75 cents exactly. His fingers moved over each piece methodically, a habit formed from years of careful budgeting. The convenience store's fluorescent lights hummed above him as he stood in front of the refrigerator, watching his breath fog up the glass. Just get the soda and go, he muttered to himself, reaching for the cheapest option. The cold can felt good in his hand after the warm Minneapolis afternoon. Behind the counter, Mr. Park nodded at him, the same way he had every Thursday for the past year. Hot day today, Andre, Mr. Park said, taking the coins. Your mother working late again? Yeah, both jobs today. Andre's voice came out quiet, tired. He'd been up since 5 a.m. for his paper route. Thanks, Mr. Park. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped out into the sunshine. His worn sneakers scuffed against the sidewalk, each step taking him deeper into the part of the neighborhood where the houses got bigger and the cars got shinier. The contrast always hit him hardest on sunny days like this, when the mansion windows gleamed and the manicured lawns looked like something from a magazine. That morning's memory surfaced unwanted. Jason Turner snickered when Andre pulled out his taped-up notebook in class. Dude, that thing's about to fall apart, Jason had said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't your parents ever buy you new stuff? Parent. Singular. The correction played automatically in Andre's head, the way it always did. He popped the tab on his soda, the crack and fizz momentarily drowning out his thoughts. His phone buzzed. A text from his mom. Working late tonight. Leftovers in fridge. Love you. Andre typed back quickly. Love you too. Be safe. He knew she'd read it during her 5-minute break between cleaning offices. 2 jobs, 6 days a week. The routine was as familiar as his own heartbeat. The houses around him kept getting bigger. 3 stories, 4-car garages, private security signs stuck in perfectly trimmed grass. Andre walked this route every day, but he never felt more out of place than when he passed through this section. Some days, he tried counting the windows on the biggest houses. Today, he kept his eyes on the sidewalk. His mind drifted to the morning's paper route. The weight of the bag cutting into his shoulder, the quiet streets still dark, porches lit up like stages waiting for their newspapers. 3 years of delivering papers had taught him every crack in the sidewalk, every house with a dog that might bark, every porch light that would flicker on with a motion sensor. The memory of his dad tried to surface, the way it always did when things got quiet, but Andre pushed it back down. 3 years old was too young to really remember someone, but somehow the absence had its own shape, its own weight. His mom never talked about him, and Andre had stopped asking. The child support checks had stopped coming 5 years ago. A group of kids his age rode past on new bikes, laughing about something. Andre recognized them from school, but they didn't look his way. His hand tightened around the soda can. The afternoon sun hit the windows of another mansion, this one with white columns and a circular driveway. Andre had delivered papers here for months, but had never seen the owners. Just their gardener, who showed up every Tuesday in a truck that was nicer than any car Andre's family had ever owned. Something caught his eye, movement against the pale wall of the house. A woman in expensive-looking clothes was leaning heavily against the stone, one hand pressed against her very pregnant belly. Her face was twisted in pain. Andre stopped walking. The woman slid down the wall slightly, her other hand shooting out to steady herself. Her breathing came in sharp gasps that Andre could hear from where he stood. His first instinct was to keep walking. This wasn't his neighborhood, wasn't his problem. But the woman made a sound, half gasp, half whimper, that carried across the perfect lawn. Just keep walking, Andre whispered to himself, even as his feet started moving toward her. This isn't going to end well. The last time he'd tried to help someone in this neighborhood, an old lady had clutched her purse and hurried inside, leaving Andre standing next to the groceries she dropped. He still remembered the shame burning in his chest. But the woman let out another pained sound, and Andre's feet kept moving forward. The soda can was sweating in his hand, leaving his palm wet and cold. Ma'am? His voice came out smaller than he meant it to. Ma'am, are you okay? The woman's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a mix of pain and There it was, that flash of fear Andre had learned to recognize. He stopped where he was, keeping his distance, trying to look as non-threatening as a 13-year-old black kid in a worn t-shirt could look in front of a $1 million home. She started to speak, but another wave of pain hit her. Her knees buckled slightly. Andre's heart pounded. Stay or go. Help or walk away. The decision sat heavy in his chest as the woman pressed her hand harder against the wall, her wedding ring catching the afternoon light. A car drove by slowly. Then another. Eyes watching, judging, assuming. Andre felt their gaze like a physical weight. The woman looked at him again, and this time the fear in her eyes was different. Not fear of him, but fear of whatever was happening to her body. Her free hand moved protectively over her stomach. Please, she said, her voice tight with pain. I think something's wrong. Andre took a deep breath. He set his soda can down on the perfectly manicured grass, took one step forward, and made his choice. Andre took another careful step forward, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The woman's breathing was getting more labored, her knuckles white where they pressed against the wall. I'm Andre, he said, using the calm voice he'd practiced in situations like this. Can you tell me your name? Another wave of pain hit her before she could answer. Her legs trembled, and Andre moved forward instinctively, ready to catch her if she fell. Sarah, she managed between breaths. Sarah Miller. Her face contorted. I live here, I can't get my key out right now. Andre nodded, maintaining a careful distance. Are you having contractions, Mrs. Miller? Yes. She let out a shaky breath. They weren't supposed to. It's too early. They were just Braxton Hicks this morning, but now. She slid down the wall another inch. Andre glanced around. The street was empty except for a couple of curtains moving in nearby windows. He could feel the eyes behind them, watching. Do you have your phone? He asked. We should call an ambulance. Sarah's free hand patted her pocket. Dead. I was just going to charge it inside, but then another contraction hit, and this time she couldn't hold back a cry of pain. Andre's own phone felt heavy in his pocket. He knew how this would look. A black teenager standing close to a wealthy, white woman in distress. His mom's warnings echoed in his head. Keep your head down. Don't give anyone a reason. How far along are you? He asked, buying time while his mind raced through options. 34 weeks, Sarah gasped. My doctor said to be careful because of complications with my first pregnancy, but I thought. She broke off, doubling over slightly. A car turned onto the street, driving slowly. Andre recognized the make, police cruiser. His heart jumped into his throat. Mrs. Miller, he said quickly, I'm going to call 911, okay? But I need you to know that's what I'm doing before I reach for my phone. She nodded frantically, another contraction building. Andre moved slowly, telegraphing every movement as he pulled out his phone. The police car crept closer. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice came through clear and professional. There's a pregnant woman in labor, Andre said, speaking carefully and clearly. She's having strong contractions and says it's too early. Where at? He looked at the house number, reciting it along with the street name. Sarah made another pained sound, and Andre instinctively stepped closer. Ma'am? The dispatcher asked. Can you hear me? Are you the pregnant woman? That's the dispatcher, Andre told Sarah. Can you talk to her? Sarah nodded, and Andre held the phone where she could speak. Yes, I'm here, she managed. The contractions are coming fast. Something feels wrong. The police car stopped. Andre's mouth went dry as he saw the officer inside watching them. An ambulance is on the way, the dispatcher said. I need you to try to stay calm. Is there someone there with you? Yes, Sarah said immediately. Yes, Andre's helping me. Please, can someone call my husband? He's at the hospital. He's a surgeon there. James Miller. Movement caught Andre's eye. People were gathering on nearby porches, watching. A woman in a jogging outfit had stopped on the sidewalk, phone in hand. They're sending help, Andre told Sarah, keeping his voice steady despite the growing audience. Can you tell me how far apart the contractions are? Sarah shook her head. I can't. Another contraction hit, and her hand shot out, grabbing Andre's arm. He froze, knowing how it looked, knowing what the witnesses were seeing. Andre, Sarah's voice was tight with pain and fear. Please don't leave. The words hit him hard. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid he'd walk away. Like his dad had walked away. Like everyone else on the street was standing back, watching, but not helping. I'm not going anywhere, he said firmly and meant it. The dispatcher's voice came through the phone. Sir, can you describe what you're seeing? Andre described Sarah's condition, remembering the medical shows his mom watched. The contractions seemed to be about 2 minutes apart. She's leaning against a wall, having trouble standing. She's 34 weeks pregnant with a history of complications. More cars were slowing down. More faces in windows. Andre heard whispers, saw phones pointing their way. Sarah's grip on his arm tightened. Talk to me, she pleaded. About anything. I need a distraction. Andre thought quickly. You know, my mom watches a show about emergency room doctors. There was this episode where a woman gave birth in an elevator. He kept talking, describing the episode, making Sarah laugh despite her pain when he told her about how the doctors had used a man's necktie to clamp the umbilical cord. The police officer had gotten out of his car, but stayed back, watching. Andre kept his movements slow and obvious, his voice steady. More neighbors had gathered. He could hear them speculating, questioning. Another contraction, Sarah warned, her fingers digging into his arm. Andre glanced at his phone's clock. 1 minute, 40 seconds since the last one. They're getting closer together, he told the dispatcher. How far away is the ambulance? 6 minutes out, came the response. Keep her calm and don't let her try to walk. An expensive-looking car pulled into the driveway. A woman in tennis clothes got out, staring at the scene in front of her house. Sarah, the woman called out. Sarah, is everything okay? Carol, Sarah managed between breaths. The baby, something's wrong. Carol hurried forward but stopped several feet away, uncertain. Her eyes darted between Sarah and Andre. I've called an ambulance, Andre said, keeping his voice professional. They're on their way. Mrs. Miller needs to stay still right now. Carol nodded slowly, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. More neighbors were approaching now that one of their own was present. Sarah's next contraction came only a minute after the last. She cried out, her knees buckling. Andre moved without thinking, supporting her weight. Easy, he said softly. I've got you. Help is coming. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for stopping. Andre thought about his unopened soda can still sitting in the grass, about how different this Thursday had turned out from every other Thursday of his life. He thought about all the people watching, about the police officer observing his every move, about his mom who would be worried if he was late getting home. But mostly he thought about this woman who had looked past her initial fear, who was trusting him with her life and her baby's life, who was holding onto his arm like he was the only solid thing in a world of pain. I'm not going anywhere, he repeated, and braced himself as another contraction began. The sound of sirens was still frustratingly distant. Andre's arm had gone numb where Sarah gripped it, but he didn't dare move. Her face was pale, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool afternoon breeze. The baby's coming, Sarah gasped. It's too early. It's too early. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone. Sir, I need you to help her into a sitting position. Carefully, Andre looked at the growing crowd of neighbors, at Carol hovering nearby, at the police officer who had finally stepped forward. Mrs. Miller, Andre said, we need to get you sitting down. Is that okay? Sarah nodded, her breath coming in short gasps. Don't let go. I won't, Andre promised. Carol, can you help me? Carol, startled at being addressed, but moved forward. Together, they helped Sarah slide down the wall until she was sitting on the manicured lawn. Her sundress spread around her like spilled water. The ambulance is 4 minutes out, the dispatcher announced. Keep her still and try to keep her calm. The police officer approached, his hand resting on his belt. Everything all right here? No, Sarah snapped through clenched teeth. Everything is not all right. Where's the ambulance? Andre felt a small surge of relief at her sharp tone. The officer stepped back, speaking into his radio. Tell me about your mom, Sarah said suddenly, squeezing Andre's hand. The one who watches medical shows. What does she do? Andre swallowed hard. She works 2 jobs, cleaning at the mall during the day, offices at night. She's the strongest person I know. Another contraction hit. Sarah's back arched, and she cried out. Andre checked his phone. 45 seconds since the last one. The contractions are getting closer, he told the dispatcher. Less than a minute apart now. More cars had stopped. Andre could hear the murmur of conversations, the clicks of phone cameras. His t-shirt was soaked with sweat, but he didn't dare wipe his face. Every movement felt watched, judged. Andre, Sarah's voice was tight with fear. I think my water just broke. Carol gasped. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Andre forced himself to stay focused on Sarah's face, on the dispatcher's voice, on the distant sound of sirens. The ambulance is almost here, he said. Just hold on. I can't, Sarah sobbed. It hurts too much. James should be here. He should be here. Tell me about him, Andre said quickly. Your husband. You said he's a surgeon? Sarah nodded, grateful for the distraction. Pediatric surgeon. He's probably in surgery right now, not knowing. Another contraction cut her off. The police officer had moved closer again, speaking into his radio with increased urgency. Andre could hear fragments. Situation escalating, medical emergency. My first baby, Sarah managed between breaths, was premature too. 28 weeks. The doctor said I might not be able to have another. Her voice broke. Andre squeezed her hand. But you did. You're having another one right now. She gave a short, pained laugh. Not exactly how I planned it. On my lawn with a teenager I just met. Better than an elevator with a necktie, Andre said, and was rewarded with another laugh that turned into a groan. Something's happening, Sarah said, panic rising in her voice. Something's different. The dispatcher's voice became sharper. Sir, is she saying she feels the need to push? Before Andre could ask, Sarah screamed. The sound cut through the murmur of the crowd, silencing everyone. Yes, Andre said into the phone, his own panic finally showing. I think that's what's happening. The ambulance is 1 minute out, the dispatcher said. Do not let her push if possible. Keep her breathing. Andre looked at Sarah's terrified face, at the gathering crowd, at Carol's helpless expression. He thought about his mom, about how she handled crisis after crisis with calm determination. Mrs. Miller, he said firmly, look at me. We're going to breathe together. Okay, like this. He demonstrated the breathing pattern he'd seen on TV shows, exaggerating it until Sarah followed along. The sound of sirens grew louder. Red and white lights reflected off the mansion's windows. They're almost here, Andre said. Just keep breathing with me. Sarah's grip on his hand tightened impossibly. Don't leave when they come, she whispered. Please. I'm scared. Andre thought about all the times he'd been scared. When his dad left, when the bills piled up, when he walked through this neighborhood feeling eyes on him. He thought about his mom working 2 jobs without complaining, about her constant reminder to keep his head high no matter what. I'm staying right here, he said, and meant it more than he'd meant anything in his 13 years. The ambulance turned onto the street, lights flashing, siren wailing. The crowd parted. Paramedics jumped out, grabbing equipment. Andre started to step back, to let the professionals take over, but Sarah's grip remained firm. This is Andre, she told the first paramedic to reach them. He's been helping me. He stays. The paramedic, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, nodded without hesitation. Okay, Andre. Hold her hand and keep doing what you're doing. We're going to work around you. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. The paramedics moved with practiced efficiency, asking questions, taking vital signs, setting up equipment. The police officer helped keep the crowd back. Carol disappeared into the house to get Sarah's hospital bag. Through it all, Andre kept his hand in Sarah's, kept breathing with her, kept talking about nothing and everything just to keep her mind off the pain. Finally, they were ready to move her to the ambulance. As they helped Sarah onto the stretcher, she looked at Andre with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said, for stopping, for staying, for everything. Andre nodded, his throat tight. You're going to be okay. Both of you. The paramedic touched his shoulder. You did good, kid. Real good. As they loaded Sarah into the ambulance, Andre finally stepped back. He could feel the crowd's eyes on him, but their stares felt different now. The police officer gave him a nod of respect. Andre watched the ambulance pull away, its siren now a distant wail. His abandoned soda can still sat in the grass, warm and forgotten. Slowly, the crowd dispersed. The officer returned to his car. Carol gave Andre a small smile before going inside. The afternoon sun continued to shine on the mansion's windows as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Andre picked up his soda can and started walking home. His mom would be worried. He had homework to do. Tomorrow morning, he'd have papers to deliver. But something had changed. He could feel it in the way he walked, in the way he held his head. He had made a choice today, the right choice, and nothing could take that away from him. His phone buzzed. A text from his mom. "Everything okay? You're usually home by now." Andre looked back at the mansion, then down at his phone. "Yeah," he typed. "Everything's okay. I've got a story to tell you when you get home." Andre sat at his kitchen table, staring at his untouched math homework. The events of the afternoon kept replaying in his mind. His hand still tingled where Sarah had gripped it. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello," he answered cautiously. "Is this Andre?" A man's voice, professional but tired. "This is Dr. James Miller, Sarah's husband." Andre sat up straight. "Yes, sir. Is Mrs. Miller okay?" "She's stable. The baby, too." Dr. Miller's voice cracked slightly. "The paramedics told me what you did. They said if you hadn't been there..." "I just helped her stay calm," Andre said quickly. "You did much more than that." A pause. "Sarah's asking for you. Would you be willing to come to the hospital?" Andre glanced at the clock. 7:30 p.m. His mom wouldn't be home for hours. I don't have a way to get there, sir. I'll send a car. Is that okay?" 20 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up outside Andre's apartment building. The driver, wearing a crisp uniform, opened the door for him. Andre slid into the leather seat, acutely aware of his worn jeans and faded t-shirt. The car smelled new. Classical music played softly through hidden speakers. "First time in a car like this?" the driver asked, catching Andre's wide-eyed expression in the rearview mirror. "Yes, sir." "Well, you earned it from what I hear." The driver smiled. "Name's Marcus. Dr. Miller told me what happened." Andre watched the city slide past the tinted windows. "Is everyone at the hospital talking about it?" "Kid, when the wife of our best pediatric surgeon goes into premature labor on her front lawn, people talk." Marcus chuckled. "When they hear who helped her, they talk more." The hospital loomed ahead, its windows lit up against the darkening sky. Marcus pulled up to the main entrance where a tall man in scrubs waited. "That's Dr. Miller," Marcus said. "He'll take care of you from here." Dr. Miller stepped forward as Andre got out of the car. He looked exactly like what Andre thought a surgeon should look like. Confident, composed, except for the slight redness around his eyes. "Andre." He extended his hand. "Thank you for coming." Andre shook it, noting the firm grip. "How's Mrs. Miller?" "Stable. The contractions have stopped." They walked into the hospital. "They're monitoring her and the baby closely, but it looks like you helped her get help just in time." The elevator ride was quiet. Andre tried not to stare at his reflection in the polished doors. Sarah's room was private, with a view of the city. She lay in bed, monitors beeping steadily around her. Her face lit up when she saw Andre. "You came," she said, reaching out her hand. Andre took it automatically, just like he had hours earlier. Her grip was gentler now. "The nurses have been asking about you," she said. "I told them how you kept me calm, how you made me laugh even when I was terrified. I just remembered what my mom always says about staying calm in emergencies," Andre said. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," Dr. Miller said. "I'd like to meet her." "She's working tonight." "Both jobs?" Something passed between Sarah and her husband, a look Andre couldn't quite read. A nurse came in to check Sarah's vitals. "Is this our hero?" she asked, smiling at Andre. "I'm not," Andre started. "Yes," Sarah interrupted. "This is Andre." The nurse adjusted something on one of the monitors. "The whole floor's been talking about how you handled everything. Very impressive for someone your age." Andre shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Miller noticed. "Would you like to see the baby monitoring equipment?" he asked. "I could explain how it works." Andre nodded gratefully. Dr. Miller led him to the complex machine beside Sarah's bed. "See these lines? They show the baby's heartbeat. and these show any contractions. Dr. Miller explained each element, his voice carrying the practiced ease of someone used to teaching. Andre found himself asking questions, fascinated. He didn't notice Sarah watching them with thoughtful eyes. A soft knock interrupted. Another doctor entered, older, female, with gray hair and sharp eyes. "Sarah, James," she nodded to them. "And you must be Andre. I'm Dr. Chun, head of obstetrics. Mind if I check a few things?" The next few minutes were a blur of medical terms and quiet discussions. Andre started to step back, but Sarah kept hold of his hand. "The good news," Dr. Chun finally said, "is that we've stopped the labor. The bad news is you'll need to stay here for observation, Sarah. Possibly until delivery." Sarah's hand tightened on Andre's. "How long?" "Could be days, could be weeks. We'll monitor you closely." Dr. Chun made a note in her chart. "You're lucky this young man was there. Premature labor at 34 weeks with your history. Well, timing was crucial." Andre felt the weight of everyone's eyes on him. He stared at the floor. "It's getting late," Dr. Miller said gently. "Andre, let me have Marcus take you home." "Wait," Sarah said. She looked at her husband. "James, can we?" Another silent exchange passed between them. Dr. Miller nodded. "Andre," Sarah said, "we'd like to help you and your mother. If you'll let us." Andre's stomach tightened. "Mrs. Miller, you don't have to. I know we don't have to." Her voice was firm. "But you helped me when others just watched. Let us help you. We know about your mother's 2 jobs," Dr. Miller added. "As it happens, we have an opening for a patient care coordinator. Good benefits, including health insurance. Would she be interested in applying?" Andre thought about his mom's exhausted face. About the night she came home with aching feet and worried eyes. She's really good with people," he said quietly. "But she doesn't have a college degree." "Experience matters more," Dr. Miller said. "And from what you've told us about her, she sounds perfect for the position." Sarah squeezed his hand again. "There's more. James is on the board of St. Mark's Academy. They have an excellent scholarship program." Andre's head spun. St. Mark's was the private school he passed every morning on his paper route. The one with the huge library and the science labs he'd only seen through windows. "I couldn't," he started. "You can," Sarah said softly. "You showed more compassion and maturity today than most adults I know. You deserve this chance." A phone buzzed. Dr. Miller checked his. "Andre, your mother just arrived home. Marcus is waiting to take you back." Andre looked at Sarah, at Dr. Miller, at the machines monitoring the baby he'd helped save. Can I think about it?" "Of course," Sarah smiled. "We're not going anywhere." "Well, I'm definitely not going anywhere for a while." Andre managed a small laugh. Dr. Miller walked him to the elevator. "Son," he said as they waited, "what you did today, you showed remarkable character. Whatever you decide about our offer, don't ever forget that." The elevator doors opened. Andre stepped inside. His reflection multiplied in the mirrored walls. For the first time, he looked himself in the eye. "Thank you, sir," he said, and meant it for everything. The offer, the respect, the recognition of who he was beyond what he looked like. As Marcus drove him home through the darkening city, Andre thought about choices. The ones we make in split seconds that change everything, and the bigger ones that shape our futures. His phone buzzed. A text from his mom. "Just got home. You said you have a story to tell me?" Andre smiled. "Yeah." He typed back. "A pretty amazing one. And Mom, I think things are about to change for us." Andre's mom sat at their small kitchen table, her work uniform still on, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She hadn't spoken for several minutes after Andre finished telling her about the afternoon's events. "And they just offered you a scholarship?" she finally asked. "Just like that?" "And a job for you," Andre said. "At the hospital. 1 job, not 2. With benefits." She shook her head slowly. "Baby, things like this don't just happen." "But it did happen." Andre pulled out his phone, showing her Dr. Miller's number. "They want you to come in tomorrow morning." Dr. Miller said he'd make sure your current jobs understand. His mom's hands trembled slightly. "Andre, do you know what people will say? That we're taking advantage. That we—" "Let them talk," Andre interrupted, surprising himself with his firmness. "You always tell me to hold my head high. That's what I did today. That's what I'm doing now." The morning paper route felt different the next day. Andre walked the familiar streets with his bag of newspapers. But now he noticed things he'd usually ignored. The way Mrs. Peterson waved from her porch, how Mr. Johnson actually looked at him instead of through him. "Hey, Andre," a voice called out. It was Carol, Sarah's neighbor, in her running clothes. "I was hoping to catch you." Andre tensed slightly, but kept his movements steady as he delivered the paper to the next house. "I want to apologize," Carol said, jogging in place. "For yesterday. For not helping right away. It's okay," Andre said automatically. "No, it's not." Carol stopped jogging. "I saw a neighbor in trouble, and I hesitated." "You didn't?" Before Andre could respond, a black SUV pulled up. The window rolled down, revealing one of the mothers he recognized from his route. "Andre? I'm Mrs. Whitman, Jason's mom." Her smile seemed nervous. "I heard about what happened yesterday." "With Sarah Miller?" Andre nodded, clutching his paper bag tighter. "I just wanted to say, well, Jason told me about the notebook incident. In class." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "We're going to have a long talk about that. And about a few other things." "It's fine," Andre said, but Mrs. Whitman shook her head. "It's not fine. None of it was fine." She glanced at Carol, then back at Andre. "We could do better. We should do better." More neighbors were emerging, some for their morning papers, others just watching. Andre kept delivering, one house at a time, aware of every eye on him. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Hope it's okay that James told some people about yesterday." The story's spreading through the hospital. "Your mom's interview is at 10. Tell her not to worry. Just be herself." Another buzz. This time from Jason Turner himself. "Hey man, sorry about the notebook thing. For real. Mom said you might be coming to St. Mark's? That's my school." Andre pocketed his phone without responding. He had 3 more blocks of papers to deliver. The sun was fully up by the time he finished his route. His mom would be getting ready for her interview, probably trying on every combination of her nice clothes. Walking past Sarah's house, Andre paused. The wall where she had leaned looked ordinary now, no sign of yesterday's drama. But a car slowed as it passed, the driver clearly looking at the spot. "Andre!" A police car pulled up, the same officer from yesterday. "Got a minute?" Andre's heart rate picked up, but he stood his ground. "Yes, sir." The officer got out, adjusting his belt. "Stevens," he said, extending his hand. "Greg Stevens. I want to apologize for how I handled things yesterday." Andre shook his hand, surprised by the firm grip. "I saw a situation and made assumptions," Officer Stevens continued. "Wrong ones. You showed more composure than most adults would have." "I just did what anyone should have done," Andre said. "But they didn't, did they?" Stevens glanced around the quiet street. They all stood back and watched. "You stepped up." More cars were driving by, slowly now. Andre recognized some of the parents dropping their kids off at the public school he attended. For now, at least. "People are talking," Stevens said. "About what happened. About how they reacted. Or didn't react." He scratched his chin. "Sometimes it takes a kid to make adults see their own prejudices." Andre thought about his mom, probably putting on her one good blazer right now. About Sarah in her hospital bed. About Dr. Miller's firm handshake and direct gaze. "My mom says change happens one person at a time," he said. Stevens nodded. "Smart woman. Your mom. Heard she's interviewing at the hospital today." "News travels fast," Andre observed. "In this neighborhood?" "Like lightning." Stevens smiled slightly. "But maybe this time, that's not a bad thing." Andre's phone buzzed again. His mom. "How do I look?" with a photo attached. She was wearing the blazer he'd expected, her hair neat, her smile nervous but determined. "Perfect," he texted back. "Just be yourself, Mom. That's more than enough." "You should head home," Stevens said, noting the time. "Big day for your family." Family. Singular like always. But somehow it didn't feel small anymore. Walking home, Andre passed more neighbors than usual. Some nodded, some smiled, some still looked away. But something had shifted. He could feel it in the air, in the way people's eyes followed him with curiosity instead of suspicion. His phone kept buzzing. Messages from classmates who'd never texted him before. Questions about St. Mark's. About Sarah. About what had happened. Andre thought about Sarah's grip on his hand, about Dr. Miller's offer, about his mom's trembling fingers around her coffee cup, about choices and changes and chances. One person at a time, his mom always said. One choice at a time. He climbed the stairs to their apartment, where his mom was probably pacing, rehearsing answers to interview questions, where their small kitchen table was covered with forms from St. Mark's, where everything familiar was about to change. Andre smiled. Sometimes change came slowly, wearing you down like water on rock. And sometimes it came all at once, in a single afternoon, with a pregnant woman sliding down a wall and a teenage boy making a choice. He opened their apartment door. "Mom? Need help getting ready?" She turned, nervous energy radiating from her pressed clothes and carefully applied makeup. "Do you think I can do this?" Andre thought about everything he'd seen in the last 24 hours. Fear turning to trust, suspicion to respect, barriers breaking down one look, one word, one choice at a time. "Mom," he said, "you can do anything." And in that moment, standing in their small apartment with the morning sun streaming through the windows, they both believed it. The hospital lobby gleamed with polished floors and tall windows. Andre sat in one of the plush chairs, watching his mom disappear into an elevator with Dr. Miller. She'd squeezed his hand before going up, just like Sarah had squeezed his yesterday. "You must be Andre's mother," Dr. Miller had said, shaking her hand. "I've heard a lot about you." "Marie," she'd answered, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Marie Jackson." Now Andre waited, trying not to check his phone every minute. Sarah had texted earlier, "Your mom's interviewing with my favorite nurse manager. She'll love her." A familiar face appeared. Marcus, the driver from last night. "Thought you might want some company," Marcus said, sitting down. "And maybe a snack?" He offered Andre a paper bag from the hospital cafe. "Thanks," Andre said, pulling out a chocolate muffin. "But don't you have other people to drive?" Marcus shrugged. "Dr. Miller asked me to stick around. Said your mom might need a ride to her other jobs after this to give notice." The thought made Andre's stomach flip. "You think she'll get it?" "Kid, from what I heard, they created this position specifically for her." Marcus smiled. After Dr. Miller heard about her working 2 jobs and still raising a son who'd stopped to help a stranger? Let's just say he was impressed. People walked past, doctors in white coats, nurses in scrubs, visitors clutching coffee cups. Some glanced at Andre with recognition. "Word spreads fast in a hospital," Marcus observed. "Everyone knows about the teenager who helped Sarah Miller. And now they're meeting his mother." Andre's phone buzzed. A text from Jason. "For real, man, if you come to St. Mark's, I'll show you around. No BS." Before he could respond, another message came through. This one from Sarah. "Your mom is amazing. Janet just texted me from the interview. You changed things," Marcus said quietly. "Not just for you and your mom. For this whole community." Andre looked up. "I just helped someone who needed it." "Yeah, but you did it without hesitation. Despite everything." Marcus gestured around the lobby. "People noticed. People are still noticing." The elevator dinged. Andre's mom emerged with Dr. Miller and a woman in navy blue scrubs. All 3 were smiling. "Andre," his mom called, her voice thick with emotion. "Come here, baby." He walked over, aware of the eyes following him. "Marie starts Monday," Dr. Miller announced. "And Janet here has some ideas about additional training that could lead to advancement opportunities." The woman in scrubs, Janet, nodded. "Your mother has exactly the kind of experience we need. Real-world problem-solving, compassion, dedication." Andre hugged his mom, feeling her trembling slightly. "Marcus will drive you to your other jobs," Dr. Miller said. "Take all the time you need to give notice properly. We respect loyalty." Marie wiped her eyes carefully. "I still can't believe." "Believe it," Janet said firmly. "You earned this. Both of you did." Another elevator opened. Sarah was being wheeled out by a nurse, Dr. Chen walking alongside. "I heard voices I recognized," Sarah called out. "Had to come say congratulations." "Mrs. Miller, you should be resting," Andre said automatically. Sarah laughed. "See? That right there. Always thinking of others first. Like mother, like son." Marie stepped forward. "Mrs. Miller, I don't know how to thank you and your husband." "Please, it's Sarah." And you don't need to thank us. Sarah reached for Marie's hand. Your son saved more than just me yesterday. He made us all look at ourselves differently. Dr. Chin checked her watch. 2 minutes, Sarah. Then back to bed. People were gathering in the lobby now, drawn by the small crowd. Andre recognized them from yesterday. Paramedics coming off shift, nurses who'd been on duty. Is it true? One of the paramedics asked. You're joining the team, Mrs. Jackson? Marie nodded, standing straighter. Patient care coordinator? Perfect, the paramedic said. We need someone who understands what families are going through. Someone who's been there. Andre's phone buzzed again. Carol, just heard the news. The whole neighborhood is talking. Good talking. About time things changed around here. Sarah was beaming from her wheelchair. Oh. And Andre, James submitted your scholarship recommendation to St. Mark's this morning. The board meets next week, but... She winked. Dr. Chin sighed. Okay, back upstairs. Doctor's orders. Wait, Sarah said. She looked at Andre. Thank you for teaching us all something about courage and compassion. As Sarah was wheeled back to the elevator, more people approached. Staff members introducing themselves to Marie, security guards offering congratulations. Even the coffee shop barista coming out with free drinks. Ready to go, give notice at your other jobs? Marcus asked Marie. She looked at Andre, her eyes bright. Ready for everything to change? Andre thought about his paper route this morning, about the nodding neighbors and curious eyes, about Jason's text and Carol's apology, about Sarah's grip on his hand and Dr. Miller's firm handshake. Yeah, he said. I think we are. As they walked out to Marcus's car, Andre looked back at the hospital, at its gleaming windows and automatic doors, at the people inside who were already becoming part of their new world. His phone buzzed one last time. Sarah again. One person at a time, right? One choice at a time. You and your mom are proof that those choices matter. Andre smiled, helping his mom into the car's leather back seat. Yesterday, he'd been a teenager with a paper route, watching life happen behind those mansion windows. Today, he was still that teenager. But now he was also something more, proof that sometimes all it takes is one person making one choice to change everything. Ready? Marcus asked from the driver's seat. Andre looked at his mom, saw the hope and pride in her eyes, and nodded. Ready? 3 days had passed since Andre helped Sarah Miller, but the neighborhood felt different. As he walked his paper route that Saturday morning, he noticed the changes more clearly than ever. Good morning, Andre. Mrs. Peterson called from her porch. She'd never used his name before. Did you hear? Sarah had the baby last night. Andre stopped on the sidewalk. What? Is everything okay? They're both doing fine. Carol just posted about it in the neighborhood group. Mrs. Peterson smiled. A little boy. They named him Andrew. Andre's hands went still on the newspapers. Andrew. They'd named the baby. His phone buzzed. Dr. Miller. Mother and son doing well. 5 pounds 4 ounces. Sarah's asking for you. Can Marcus pick you up after your route? Hey, Andre. Another voice, Jason Turner, jogging up in his St. Mark's track uniform. Mom wanted me to tell you. The board meeting got moved up. They're reviewing your scholarship application today. Andre's stomach tightened. Today? Yeah, emergency session or whatever. Jason fell in a step beside him. Need help with those papers? I'm supposed to be doing community service anyway. Andre looked at him suspiciously. Since when? Since Mom found out how I acted about your notebook. Jason shrugged. She's got me volunteering, doing all kinds of stuff. Says I need to expand my perspective or something. To Andre's surprise, Jason actually started helping, learning the route as they walked. The work went faster with 2 people. So what's it like? Jason asked after a while. Having everyone know who you are now. Andre thought about it. Weird. Good weird mostly. But still weird. His phone buzzed again. His mom this time. Baby Carol just called. She's starting a community support group. Wants me to help run it once I'm settled at the hospital. Your mom starts Monday, right? Jason asked. At the hospital? Word really does travel fast around here. Like I said, everyone knows who you are now. Jason handed a paper to Mr. Johnson, who actually smiled at them. But like in a good way. They finished the route as the sun climbed higher. Andre's phone kept buzzing. Messages from Sarah, from Dr. Miller, from neighbors he'd delivered papers to for years, but never really spoken with. Marcus's car pulled up right on schedule. "Ready to meet your namesake?" "He's not." Andre started. "5 pounds, 4 ounces of yes he is." Marcus grinned. "Come on. Sarah's waiting." Jason waved as Andre got in the car. "Let me know about the board meeting." The hospital felt different too. People nodded as Andre walked through the lobby, some even greeting him by name. "There he is." Janet, the nurse manager, called out, "Your mom's orientation materials are all ready for Monday. We're so excited to have her join the team." The maternity ward was quiet when they arrived. Dr. Miller stood outside Sarah's room, talking softly with Dr. Chen. "Andre," Dr. Miller smiled. "Come meet my son." The room was dim and peaceful. Sarah sat propped up in bed, holding a tiny bundle. She looked tired but radiant. "Andre," she said softly, "come see what all the fuss was about." He approached carefully. The baby was impossibly small, with a shock of dark hair and skin the color of coffee with lots of cream. "Want to hold him?" Sarah asked. I've never." "Here." She showed him how to position his arms, support his head. "There you go." The baby, Andrew, yawned, his tiny fingers flexing. Andre stood perfectly still, afraid to breathe too hard. "We wanted to honor the person who helped bring him safely into the world," Sarah said. "Hope that's okay." Andre couldn't speak. He stared at the tiny face, thinking about choices and consequences, about split-second decisions that change everything. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Dr. Miller checked his own phone and smiled. "The board meeting just ended," he said. "Full scholarship, starting immediately after winter break. If you want it." Andre looked down at baby Andrew, then at Sarah, then at Dr. Miller. "I want it," he said quietly. "Thank you." "No," Sarah said. "Thank you for showing us all what courage looks like." A nurse came in to check vitals. Andre carefully handed the baby back to Sarah. "Oh," the nurse said. "Are you the Andre? The one everyone's talking about?" Before he could answer, another nurse poked her head in. "Janet wanted me to remind you. Your mom's welcome breakfast is Monday at 8:30. The whole department's coming." Andre's phone buzzed yet again. A text from his mom. "Carol just picked me up. We're touring the community center. They want to start a tutoring program. Baby, I think we're really doing this. It's something, isn't it?" Dr. Miller said softly. "How one moment of kindness can start a chain reaction." Andre watched Sarah with her baby, with Andrew, and thought about ripples in still water, about how one small stone can change the whole surface. "Yeah," he said. "Something." His phone buzzed one more time. "Jason, dude, just heard about the scholarship. Mom says we're having a celebration dinner. Your mom, too." No arguments. Andre looked around the hospital room, at Sarah and baby Andrew, at Dr. Miller's proud smile, at the nurses who kept finding excuses to peek in. 3 days ago, he'd been a teenager with a paper route and a taped-up notebook. Now he was still that teenager. But he was also something more, something that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to emerge. "One person at a time," he whispered, remembering his mom's words. "What's that?" Sarah asked. "Just something my mom always says." Andre smiled. "About how change happens." "Smart woman, your mom," Dr. Miller said. "We're lucky to have you both in our community." Community. The word felt different now. Bigger. More real. Andre's phone buzzed again, but this time he didn't check it. He already knew what it would say. Another message about another small change, another ripple spreading out from that one moment when he'd chosen to stop and help. Instead, he watched baby Andrew sleep, thinking about names and choices and new beginnings. Sometimes help arrives in an ambulance with flashing lights. And sometimes it arrives in quieter ways. In a teenager stopping to help, in a community learning to see differently, in a baby named Andrew who would grow up knowing the story of how one small choice could change everything. The celebration dinner at the Turners' house felt surreal. Andre sat at their massive dining room table, watching his mom chat with Mrs. Turner like they'd known each other for years. "More lasagna?" Mrs. Turner asked, already serving another portion. "You're too skinny, Andre. We need to get you ready for St. Mark's basketball team." "I don't really play," Andre started. "You should try out," Jason interrupted. Coach Martinez is always looking for new talent. And you're tall enough. Andre looked at his mom, who was deep in conversation with Mrs. Turner about the new community tutoring program. We could use the gym at the community center, his mom was saying. Carol already talked to the director. Perfect, Mrs. Turner exclaimed. I can help coordinate volunteers. We have so many retired teachers in the neighborhood who'd love to help. Andre's phone lit up with a text from Marcus. How's the celebration going? Dr. Miller wanted me to remind you. Sarah and baby Andrew are being discharged tomorrow. They're hoping you'll stop by. Hey, Jason said, lowering his voice. For real about that notebook thing? I was a jerk. Andre looked up, surprised by Jason's serious tone. Yeah, you were, he agreed. My mom. Jason glanced at Mrs. Turner. She made me really think about it. About how I've never had to worry about stuff like that. Like ever. Before Andre could respond, the doorbell rang. Jason's dad appeared with Carol and 3 other neighbors, all carrying dishes. Hope we're not interrupting. Carol called out. We heard there was a celebration. Mrs. Turner jumped up. Of course not. Come in, come in. Marie, you remember everyone from the community center tour. Andre watched as their small dinner turned into an impromptu neighborhood gathering. People kept arriving, bringing food and congratulations. Your mom's going to be amazing at the hospital, Carol told him, sitting down with a plate of lasagna. We were talking about starting a scholarship fund, for other kids in the area. The Sarah Miller Scholarship, Mrs. Turner added, for students who demonstrate exceptional character. Andre's phone buzzed again. Dr. Miller, sorry to interrupt the celebration, but Sarah insists on FaceTiming. Baby Andrew is awake. Mrs. Turner immediately called for everyone's attention. Quick, everyone, Sarah's calling. They gathered around Andre's phone as Sarah's tired but happy face appeared on screen. Baby Andrew made small noises in her arms. Andre. Sarah beamed. Had to show you. He's wearing the onesie your mom brought by. It's a little big, but he'll grow into it. The onesie read, My hero delivers papers, a joke gift from the hospital staff. How are you feeling? Andre's mom asked, leaning into frame. Ready to go home tomorrow, Sarah said. The whole street's planning a welcome party. Speaking of which, Marie, did Carol tell you about the community outreach program we're planning? Andre sat back, watching his mom fall in an easy conversation with Sarah while neighbors crowded around, cooing at baby Andrew through the phone. His phone buzzed with another message, this one from Officer Stevens. Hear the celebrations in full swing. Had to stay on duty, but wanted to say congratulations. You earned this, kid. Jason plopped down next to him again. Weird, right? How everything's different now. Good different, Andre said, watching his mom laugh at something Carol said. Yeah. Jason hesitated. Listen about ST. Marks, some of the guys might be weird at first, but I got your back. Andre looked at him. Why? Because... Jason struggled for words. Because you showed me something, I guess. About who I want to be. More people arrived, the paramedics from that day, stopping by after their shift. Janet from the hospital. Even Mr. Park from the convenience store, carrying a case of Andre's favorite soda. On the house, Mr. Park said, grinning. For our neighborhood hero. I'm not. Andre started his usual protest. Yeah, you are, Jason interrupted. Deal with it. Andre watched the scene unfold. His mom surrounded by new friends, neighbors planning programs to help others, Sarah and baby Andrew on FaceTime, the whole community coming together in ways he'd never imagined possible. His phone buzzed one more time. A group text from his future teachers at ST. Marks, welcome to the family. We're looking forward to having you join us. You okay? His mom asked, noticing his quiet moment. Andre looked around the room, at Jason's genuine smile, at Carol's enthusiastic planning with Mrs. Turner, at Mr. Park arranging sodas in the Turners' fancy kitchen. Yeah, he said. I'm good. The celebration continued into the evening. People shared stories, made plans, built connections. Andre's mom got pulled into a dozen different conversations about community programs, hospital work, and education initiatives. You know what's crazy? Jason said as they watched the adults talk. All this happened because you stopped to help someone. Andre thought about that moment, Sarah against the wall, his choice to step forward, everything that followed. One person at a time, he said. What? Something my mom always says. About how change happens, Jason nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that now. Outside, the sun was setting on their changing neighborhood. Tomorrow, Sarah and baby Andrew would come home. Monday, his mom would start her new job. Soon, he'd put on the St. Mark's uniform for the first time. But right now, in this moment, Andre watched his old world and new world merge into something unexpected and beautiful. His phone buzzed again. He didn't need to check it. He already knew what it would say. Another message about another small change, another connection made, another barrier broken down. One person at a time, one choice at a time, one moment that changed everything. 6 months had passed since that Thursday afternoon when Andre stopped to help Sarah Miller. Standing in front of his mirror, adjusting the blue and gold tie of his St. Mark's uniform, he barely recognized his own reflection. Andre, his mom called from the kitchen. Marcus is here. Their apartment looked different now, too. New furniture, fresh paint, windows that didn't stick. Not extravagant, but comfortable. His mom had insisted on keeping it modest, even with her new salary. 1 minute. Andre grabbed his backpack, no tape holding it together anymore, and took one last look in the mirror. Marcus waited in the hallway, car keys jingling. Ready for the big day. Today wasn't just any school day. It was the official dedication of the Sarah Miller Community Center. Formerly just the Community Center, now expanded and renovated thanks to a coalition of neighborhood donors. Got your speech ready? Marcus asked as they headed down the stairs. Andre patted his pocket where the folded papers sat. As the first recipient of the Sarah Miller Scholarship, he'd been asked to speak at the dedication. His mom was already in the car, wearing her hospital ID badge and a new blazer. No more cleaning uniforms, no more aching feet, and endless double shifts. Sarah just texted, she said as Andre slid into the back seat. Baby Andrew's already there, all dressed up. Andre smiled. At 6 months old, Andrew Miller had become the neighborhood's unofficial mascot. His monthly growth photos on the community board got more likes than any other posts. The morning sun hit the familiar streets differently now. Andre's paper route had been passed on to another kid, recommended by Andre himself, a 13-year-old from his old neighborhood who needed the work. They passed Mrs. Peterson's house, where a free tutoring sign advertised the new program his mom helped run. 3 afternoons a week, the living room filled with kids getting homework help from retired teachers and college students. The community center came into view. The new sign gleamed above the entrance, where a small crowd had already gathered. Andre spotted Jason in his St. Mark's uniform, helping set up chairs. There's my favorite patient care coordinator, Carol called out as they parked. She hugged Andre's mom, then Andre. The press is here. Try not to look nervous. Press? Andre's stomach dropped. Just local news, Carol assured him. They're doing a piece on community transformation. Sarah's idea. Speaking of Sarah, she appeared with baby Andrew in her arms, Dr. Miller beside her. The baby wore a tiny St. Mark's onesie, a gift from Jason's mom. Andre. Sarah handed Andrew to her husband and hugged Andre tight. The speech all ready? Ready as it'll ever be, he managed. More people arrived. Officer Stevens, out of uniform for once. Mr. Park carrying boxes of donated refreshments. Janet and other hospital staff still in their scrubs from the night shift. Even some of Andre's new classmates from St. Mark's mixing easily with kids from his old neighborhood. Places, everyone? Carol called out. We're starting in 5 minutes. Andre found a seat on the small stage, between his mom and Sarah. The folded speech crinkled in his pocket. Dr. Miller stepped up to the podium first, talking about community and connection, about breaking down barriers and building bridges. Andre only half listened, watching the crowd. There was Jason, sitting with both kids from St. Mark's and Andre's old public school. Mrs. Peterson chatting with Mr. Park. Hospital staff mingling with neighbors who'd once crossed the street to avoid each other. And now, Dr. Miller said, I'd like to introduce Andre Jackson, our first Sarah Miller Scholar, who showed us all what community really means. Andre stood, unfolding his speech with slightly shaking hands. The crowd quieted. He looked at his mom, who nodded encouragingly. At Sarah, holding baby Andrew. At all the faces watching him. Faces that 6 months ago wouldn't have even seen him. Andre set the speech down without reading it. 6 months ago, he said, his voice steady, I was walking home with a soda when I saw someone who needed help. I almost didn't stop, almost walked away, because in this neighborhood, people like me didn't help people like Mrs. Miller. We weren't supposed to even see each other. The crowd was silent listening. But I did stop, and Mrs. Miller did see me, really saw me. And that one moment changed everything, not just for me and my mom, but for all of us. He gestured at the crowd, at the new sign, at the mixed group of students sitting together. This community center isn't just a building. It's proof that change is possible, that barriers can come down, that we can learn to see each other, help each other, be there for each other. Baby Andrew made a happy, gurgling sound, making everyone laugh. 6 months ago, I delivered papers to houses I never thought I'd enter. Now those houses have open doors. 6 months ago, this neighborhood was divided. Now we're planning programs together, teaching each other, learning from each other. Andre looked at his mom, saw the tears in her eyes. My mom always said change happens one person at a time, one choice at a time, one moment at a time. This center, the programs, the tutoring, the scholarships, they're all about creating more of those moments. More chances to see each other, more opportunities to help. He turned to Sarah and baby Andrew. Mrs. Miller named her son Andrew. She said it was to honor the person who helped bring him safely into the world. But I think baby Andrew honors something bigger. He honors what can happen when we stop letting fear keep us apart. When we choose to help instead of turn away. When we learn to see each other as people first. The crowd was nodding now, some wiping tears. This center belongs to all of us. To the kids who need tutoring and the teachers who volunteer. To the families who need support and the neighbors who provide it. To everyone who wants to be part of making change happen. Andre looked out at the faces, familiar now, friendly now. One person at a time, one choice at a time, one moment that changes everything. He stepped back from the podium to applause. His mom hugged him tight. Sarah pressed baby Andrew into his arms. The ceremony continued. Ribbon cutting, tours, interviews. But Andre stood with Andrew, watching the community mill around, mixing and mingling without the old barriers. His phone buzzed. A text from Jason, dude. That speech. Way better than what you wrote. Andre smiled. Another buzz. His ST. Mark's basketball coach. Great words, kid. Remember, practice at 4. And another. Officer Stevens. Proud of you, Andre. You showed us all a better way. Baby Andrew grabbed at Andre's ST. Mark's tie, drooling slightly on the blue and gold stripes. Andre didn't mind. Ready to go? His mom asked later, as the crowd began to disperse. You've got basketball practice? Andre looked around one last time, at the new sign, at the mixing crowd, at all the changes 6 months had brought. Yeah, he said, handing Andrew back to Sarah. I'm ready. As Marcus drove them home, Andre watched his neighborhood pass by. Not his old neighborhood or his new one. Just his neighborhood, changed and changing, better because people had learned to see each other differently. One person at a time, one choice at a time, one moment that changed everything. And somewhere in those quiet streets, another teenager was delivering papers, walking past houses with open doors and friendly faces, part of a community that had learned to see beyond its old boundaries. All because one boy had stopped to help.